Joining us, president and founder of the Eurasia Group and G0 Media, Ian Bremmer. So, Ian, we start with this because it was only a couple days ago that we began by talking about Donald Trump's unpopularity in Europe, broadly unpopular, but interestingly, unpopular among nationalist right voters and supporters, so much so that the leaders of these movements, which had looked to Donald Trump for guidance and for an example on how to regain power, are separating themselves again from, or anew from Donald Trump, like Giorgia Meloni, the leader or the AfD party, Nigel Farage in the UK. So my question regarding what we're seeing in Albania is just how unpopular, how toxic has Donald Trump become?
Yeah, the French National Rally being much careful as well in the run-up to the 2027 election after Macron. I mean, anywhere you go in Europe right now, Trump is polling in the single to low double digits. He's incredibly unpopular. It's the opposite to Israel, for example. We saw that with Meloni, who's had a hard time at home for economic reasons, and also she just recently lost a popular referendum on changing some judicial rules. And as a consequence, when she gets into a fight with Trump, and remember, Meloni was the only European leader to actually come to in person his inauguration for the second time around, and was, really promoted herself as a Trump whisperer, that because she had access to Trump, because Trump liked her, she could be a bridge as someone that was, trying very heavily to be a constructive leader in Europe. She instead went after Trump hard. And frankly, politically, that's played well for her. I was just in Vienna, Katie, in the last 2 days, and saw the president of Austria in the morning address his audience by really taking big swings at President Trump, so much so that some of the foreigners in the audience, some of the Americans, thought it was a little untoward. But it clearly plays in Austria, and it's on the back of the corruption, as you're seeing in Albania. It's on the back of the Greenland episode. It's the unilateral decision to rip up trading agreements and charge higher tariffs. It was Trump kicking Zelensky out of the White House and suspending intelligence and defense for Ukraine. Most recently, it's the United States unilaterally using export controls to prevent allies to have access for the most advanced large language models in the AI world. Anywhere the Europeans look, they see Trump particularly as an individual that is not to be trusted, not to be worked with, and they increasingly know that he's not popular. He doesn't have much time left in the United States. So what they've been saying privately for the last year and a half, they're starting to say publicly. And that, of course, is the big change. What's going to happen after midterms when the Republicans lose the House, when they lose a few seats in Senate? The answer is that allies, like we're seeing in Europe, are going to be much, much more loud, and they're willing to criticize President Trump.
Here's an angle on this that I don't have the answer to. Maybe you do. With Donald Trump growing, his unpopularity growing, so much so that the Albanian prime minister might get ousted over this deal that he made for this Trump resort in that country, with Donald Trump launching the war in Iran and maybe starting to alienate allies in the Middle East, what he's been doing with Benjamin Netanyahu. He's been trying, his family has, to make deals all throughout this administration, deals in foreign countries for various resorts or investments, et cetera. At some point, does his financial stake, the businesses that he's connected to, do they start taking a broader hit? And then I wonder, could that possibly change Donald Trump's politics with our allies?
I don't know. I mean, is he going to go from $5 billion to $50 billion, which is the whisper number you sometimes hear among supporters, over the next 2 years? No, I think the trajectory will be more constrained. I think fewer leaders will be willing to provide as much largesse transactionally when they think that Trump is going to be out. And it's not that they're worried about being investigated. It's not that they worry that the population is going to come after them. Many of the countries doing the biggest deals are places that don't have to worry about their local populations at all, like Gulf monarchies. for example. But no, I do think that the big difference is that Trump himself is being constrained in the disruptive policies that he can promote when he puts himself above the country, as we saw so obviously with Greenland. But the key point here, Katie, and here's where you can have heart, is that doesn't mean that these countries suddenly stop believing in the United States. Two big examples. One, Pax Silica, which is the new Trump-led agreement that is meant to ensure that allies work with the Americans on semiconductors and everything that goes into that supply chain. Just last week, despite all the tech pressure from the Americans, the Europeans sign up for it. Why do they do that? Well, first of all, because that's going to be a lot longer in place than Trump is. And secondly, because the Americans are way ahead in AI and semiconductors, and the Europeans have no ability to catch up by themselves. So they understand that unless they're going to suddenly trust the Chinese more than the Americans, which is not going to happen, the ball that they're going to play is with the United States. The same thing is true with Canada. And you've seen Mark Carney plays very popular at home when he beats up on the United States and says elbows up. But he gave a speech here in New York just a couple weeks ago where he talked about how the U.S. and Canada together are a superpower and how much they need to work together to be stronger together. And again, you know, the Canada-U.S. relationship is going to outlast Trump by a very long margin. And these countries understand that they still rely on the United States for a lot. It's why I'm not as worried about the NATO summit in Istanbul in the coming weeks. It's why the G7 summit in Evian, France last week was one of the more successful, frankly. And it's because as Trump gets towards the end of his term and as the constraints on Trump become more obvious, like we've seen in reaction to the Iran war, like we saw in reaction to the U.S. tariffs on China, other countries around the world will see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say they're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Ian Bremmer, really good to have you. Thanks for getting into this a little bit differently with us today. I appreciate it.
Sure, Katie.